My dear brother, welcome back to the Dear Brother podcast. So happy, man, when I get a chance to communicate with you. More than happy when I have interviews. It's always good to fellowship with different guys and hear different stories, man. This is how we get through. We overcome with these stories. We overcome together. And, you know, our show is all about togetherness. It's about self-awareness. It's about being honest. You know, we always say the Dear Brother podcast is where grown men keep growing. So welcome, guys, to the podcast today. I'm introducing a good brother named Sam Otero. He has a story of his health. He has a story of overcoming. He has a story of ups and downs. And this is what we like to do. We like to bring on different men with different stories to encourage us, to bring their life. So what we learn is we're not by ourselves ever. I was going to say always, but we're never by ourselves. And sometimes life can make us feel alone as men. You know, you're trying to figure it out. And that lonely space that we deal with, that we talk a lot about on this show. But I like to bring interviews like this in and men like Sam in because their stories align. You'll be surprised, man, how many stories are just like yours out there. So I'm so glad to have our friend Sam Otero in today. We're going to talk about his story. We're going to talk about his journey, health journey, a lot of different things, man, to bring some encouragement to you. So I'm so delighted to have my friend Sam on today. Sam, how are you, my friend?
I am absolutely fabulous, brother. How are
It is
you?
good. It is good to have you, man. We met
Yeah.
on Facebook Messenger, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
you told me about your story, man. A little bit about your journey, and I was just excited to hear about your story, man, because I knew it would be a blessing to the men that I host this podcast for, just to hear what you've gone through, what you've overcome, man. We talked about COVID, we talked about ups and downs, health scares and everything else, man.
Yeah.
Life is life, man. And it is just good
Yeah.
to share with you today, man. How's your day going
I
today?
appreciate you. Things are going quite well, actually. Started out as a little stormy day here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and skies are opening up, and God is smiling on my lovely family, and all is good, brother. All is good. And I want to say, while I greatly value what you just said, to me this is a blessing. I'm a podcaster, video producer myself, so normally I'm in your chair. So it's actually, I don't think I've ever done this. I don't think I've ever been on a guest on another person's podcast and be able to share my story. So wow, this is a big milestone, and I value the opportunity, and may the good Lord bless this conversation. So hopefully, as you point out, other men can glean a little something from it, and the happenings to me are not for naught, and some others may be able to get something out of it.
And I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Tell us more about your family, man. Let's talk about family. Let's talk about family is important. And let's talk about family. What tell us more about your family and things.
Well, do you want to go back into the Wayback Machine, or you're talking about where I am right
Let's
now?
go where
Because
you are
they're
right now.
they're very different. My wife and I, Esther, lovely, my queen. Esther is a beautiful Haitian woman, and we married in 2019, just prior to the COVID lockdowns, like literally a month before. And I moved in with her, and boom, we got locked down and trapped in our little apartment outside of DC. So currently we are living in Charlotte, North Carolina, just what our first home here. We got three beautiful fur babies, couple gorgeous little hilarious Pomeranians, and an old cat who gets tortured by them. And oh, my daughter, the light of my life. She's now 25 years old and is living back in my native Pennsylvania, where she grew up when her mom and I split years ago. I think that's going on 7 years ago now. And she opted to stay there.
Mhm.
So we have a good relationship. She's a lovely kid, not on the faith walk that I am on by any stretch of the imagination, but we agree to disagree, and we get along well, and we love each other dearly. And my cancer scare, I have to say, as horrible as that situation was, and still is it was the impetus that God used. It was the circumstance that God used to bring me back to my daughter. So that was a beautiful situation. Other than that, honestly, man, I have a weird story because I was adopted at 1 month of age and given up by my birth family to an adoptive family, which was in many respects well, I don't want to sound ungrateful because they took me in,
Mhm.
but and provided in many ways, but in many ways it was very abusive and a negligent relationship. So I learned a lot about how not to operate from that standpoint. And that whole family is gone. So as an adult, I have me, my Lord, and my lovely wife and my daughter in my life right now. That is my family, and that's
Okay.
my focus. And it is what it is. I always wanted a big family. I wish I had a big family, but
Right.
these are the cards that I was dealt, and that's part of my journey, which I'll share with you regarding my finding my birth parents.
Okay.
That's an interesting story too.
Yeah.
So
Let's get into the adoption situation and how you said you were one when you were adopted into that family.
no, 1 month.
1 month when you were adopted
Yes.
into that family. Okay.
Mhm.
And so how long were you with that family?
They raised me.
They raised you.
Yeah, absolutely. My mother, my adoptive mother, Sam and Millie Otero, were second generation Sicilian immigrants. Or well, my dad was. Otero is a Sicilian name, and my mother was from. Her family was from Abruzzi, Italy. And she grew up in New York. Dad grew up in Pennsylvania. They were old school Roman Catholic uh, children of the immigrants that came over on the boat, and worked in the factories and helped to build the country. My dad was a businessman, had a restaurant and a bar,
Mhm.
always provided for us,
Yeah.
gave me his name. That's Sam Otero.
Mhm.
And they raised me up. I was raised in the Catholic Church. And then after coming into my own and moving on to my own and reading and delving into all things spiritual that I could find, because I was always spiritually oriented and believed in God. But I strayed, I would say, for looking in perspective now, what I know Christianity to be.
Mhm.
Right, I can look back and I can say I definitely was on was on the wrong path for where I was at the moment, but where I am right now, it was the right path because it brought me to where I am. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. So I was into all sorts of, you know, I, I was reading everything I could find, man,
Yeah.
and all kinds of new agey stuff, and really rejected Christianity because of a lot of the hypocrisy that I saw. And I'm sure my story resonates with many. You see the hypocrisy in the church, you see the money in the church, you see all these things, and you go, wait a minute, how does this align with the guy preaching um, humbleness and walking around in sandals and not owning a thing? And right, it just didn't. As a young man, none of that really reconciled with me, so I rejected it for many years, and
Mhm.
then I had a spiritual awakening. My folks died probably, I don't even remember now, 11 years ago, 12 years ago,
So
and we weren't close. We really weren't. It was a very estranged and difficult relationship.
yeah, and so
So
that's what I wanted to get back to a little bit
yeah, absolutely.
about in that situation, growing up, you mentioned in an abusive situation with your
Very
family.
much so.
Um,
Very, very much so.
yeah,
Yes.
so how did that change you as a person? How did it impact you as far as how you became a man and you're growing into your from, you were with them since 1 month, but when you come
Yeah.
into your boyhood and manhood, how did that being in a adopted, number one, that's heavy, to be adopted into a
Yeah.
family, but not only adopted into a family, adopted into a family that was abusive. How did that affect
Yeah.
your life?
But wow. that's a that's a book, man. I'll summarize it in one word, which is confusion, right? If you don't know where you came from,
Hmm.
you have no clue who sired you,
Hmm.
who's your father, right?
Yeah.
You have no clue what oven you baked in, right? Who was your mother, right? You have no clue who their mother and father was. You have no clue why you got this little blue speck in your left eye and the rest of your eye is brown.
Yeah.
You have no clue why you have this Roman nose other than you have a Sicilian name. You have no idea
Hmm.
other than you were brought into this world by a couple in Erie, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
given up at birth
Hmm.
to a convent, to a St. Joseph Catholic, what are the, God, I can't think, orphanage, right?
Okay.
Given over, and then within a month, and very sickly. I was very, very ill, very sick. They weren't sure that I was going to make it, and very malnourished. I guess I had some sort of horrible allergy to milk, and of course, I wasn't breastfed by my mother, so I was very ill. And the Catholic Church lined up my family, the Otero family,
Okay.
to adopt me.
Hmm.
And that's all I know. All I know was my birth name was Christopher, and then I'm Otero, right? So how does that affect one growing up?
Hmm.
I knew my parents always told me, and they never hid from me, that I like, as far as I can remembering, I knew I was adopted. And what that meant to me was I didn't come from these people. So there was immediately, no matter how much appreciation I did have for what they did for me,
Hmm.
food on the table, family vacations, money, taking care of the material aspect of growing up.
Hmm.
When I was younger, my mother was much less abusive. But then she slowly slid into dementia and really it got very rough through my teenage years. So through all that process, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wonderful, it was, who am I really?
Hmm.
Right? Like, I didn't know. I knew that I had this proclivity for music, loved it, wanted to be in a rock band, wanted to do this. I was artistic, but yet I was stuck in this family where my dad owned a bar, a working man's bar. And
Right.
he's wanting to give me that
Hmm.
rather than going on to pursue what it is that I felt God put me to pursue. And I had no connection to my parents
Right.
other than I lived in their house and they raised me. Now, that's not insignificant.
Right.
That is huge.
Yeah.
God bless them, because I think about where I may have ended up
Hmm.
had I not ended up there.
Yeah.
But all of that goes back to what I said, confusion. How do you navigate the world, and how do you know where you're going when you don't know where you've been? You
Hmm.
don't even know who you are. Think
Yeah.
about that for a moment. Do you know your dad?
I do.
Do you know his dad?
I do.
Imagine not knowing that
I
at
can't imagine.
all. Right. And then at the age of 51, 50 years old, finding out who that dad is.
So you
And
were 51
mhm,
when you came into the knowledge of who your actual birth father was.
both birth
Both,
parents.
both parents.
This was a God thing. I went through my whole life struggling. So you say, well, how did it affect you? There was a real spirit, and I'll use these words when I say a spirit of deception, a spirit of depression, a spirit of confusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that the circumstances that I was dealt early on in life and the lack of really constructive upbringing
Mm-hmm.
to help me deal with these matters
Yeah.
really led to a slow train wreck through my teen years, 20s, 30s, even into my 40s, because I ended up becoming, you say, how did it affect you?
Mm-hmm.
I see now that I became that which I loathed. I became that which I despised. I became that which I said I would never be. The worst aspects of how I was raised, rather than even though I said I'm learning from this and I'm never going to repeat these patterns.
Yeah.
I repeated those patterns.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I do Dear Brother live events. I was just in Reading, PA, maybe 2 Saturdays ago, and I was mentioning that I say that a lot to the men on the podcast and in live, is that you become what you hate until you can confront it.
Exactly.
And even though we all say it, I mean, my father, I knew him. My father was a rough guy. My father was a Vietnam vet. My father was a narcotics cop. My dad was hard to the metal, and at times very abusive at some
Mm-hmm.
times, and I knew some of that wasn't me. I knew a lot of that time when he would act like that, that was coming from stress of the job, of chasing people around all day.
100%.
And so I
100%.
said, I'll never. But then I found myself being so hard on my kids. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to confront that thing to really realize, hey, the very thing we say we hate, we can't do anything about it until we confront it. Now, in your situation is so very interesting because I knew my father. So even though I had these issues, I knew
Mm-hmm.
him. For you, it's much more deep because here you are confronting things that are in you that come from a father you never knew. And
Right.
then you were
And
also
and
stained
then
by the
match that with
situations
the
of being in the
father that I
darkroom.
did know. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That man, wow. So your life was more of a journey of trying to find yourself and find yourself through being tainted by a family that was taking care of you slash abusing you.
100%.
Wow, Sam.
It and you just said it. I had that veil on
Yeah,
my eyes, right?
yeah.
And through it all, I God kept working on me and kept molding me. You know, the whole potter and the clay thing, right? I see that now.
Yeah.
I do see that now, but the you said that you couldn't get through it, what you became, until you confronted it. That was an interesting. I don't know how to describe this. It's like I don't know what the psychological term would be, but my daughter can tell you. You know, I mean, as much as I loved that kid, and as much as I was a good dad in so many ways, there's many ways that I went the the complete opposite direction from what in my heart I knew was the right thing. I knew I was doing wrong. I didn't like that aspect of me. I didn't like that facet of me. I wanted to change. I didn't understand why
Yeah.
I was acting the way that I was. I saw it, I hated it, and I did it anyway.
Mm,
And it all goes back, I see now, to resentment, right? Like, I resented my parents, my birth parents, for giving me up. I didn't realize how deep that resentment went.
mm,
I resented my adoptive parents for the things they didn't do and the things they did do that were I won't even speak to this publicly here. Okay. I resented my lot in life. I resented where God had put me. Why me? Why me, Lord? Why me? 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 This sucks.
Yeah.
Is this what I really deserved? I'm supposed to be your chosen son, right? I'm supposed to be one of the blessed and follow this Christ that says, "Hey, it's all okay. I'm your dad," right?
Mm-hmm.
And until he showed me that I could let go of the resentment and the anger toward my biological parents. I could let go of the resentment and the anger toward my adoptive parents. It was okay to let that stuff go and to let go what I had chosen to become out of those circumstances. It was okay to let that go and realize that ultimately none of that matters because I am a child of God. Right. And he is my father. And at that moment, that's when the transformation started. Okay. And I knew what it meant to be a Christian, and everything started changing.
So it was your introduction to your faith that began to help you heal that past process and the resentment of both families. How did you at what point did you feel inwardly, like, did you know, even though you met your relationship with Christ and you started to form your faith, when did you know, like, something clicked? I've changed. Something is broken inside of me where I'm free to be besides what I've become.
Yeah, I knew that something was broken, but I always blamed it on somebody else. Right? Why am I the way that I am? Oh, my dad was a jerk. Whoa, my dad was an alcoholic. My dad was abusive. My mother was crazy. Oh, well, what about your birth mother? What about your birth father? You don't even know you don't even know what kind of crazy is living inside you at a genetic level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, you don't.
So all of that confusion, resentment, all of that stuff, for me, the veil started to lift when I was, how old was I? It's probably about 9 years ago now, 10 years maybe. I don't even remember. Time's going so fast. It was when God saved me from drinking. And this is an interesting story, and it correlates directly to all those things that I just laid out for you. I recognized in a very dramatic experience with the Lord that I don't want to say an alcoholic because you start getting into the clinical meanings of these things, and people have, but what I recognized was the addictive nature of my personality, right? Mm-hmm. The drinking was a symptom of the addictive nature of who I was. I came to understand the mechanism of how that worked and why Sam Matero was addictive, had an addictive personality, and sought out solace, comfort, happiness, you name it, whatever it was that I was seeking through substance abuse, through whatever. It hit me like this. I was in my late 40s. I was a school teacher, actually. And I realized, I went into, well, here's the story. I went into the kitchen. I was working in the garden, whatever. I like to work outside in the yard and put my earbuds in and listen to Tool and drink some good high test beer, right? Nice hot summer day, right? So I went in the refrigerator and I grabbed I reached for a bottle of beer. It was high alcohol content, very expensive, dark brew, and the brand name I looked at the bottle, and the brand name was Old Dirty Bastard. That was the name of this poison.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that, and I don't want to say that it was like a voice in my head, but it was like a voice in my head. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was like somebody else's thought planted in my head that just asked a simple question. Do you really want that? And I went, well, yeah, it's a hot day. I'm working in the garden. But do you really want that? Right? Like, what happens when you drink 3 or 4 of these things? Well, I feel good. I get a little buzz, and then I'm done working, and then I crash, and then I feel like crap. Right. Okay. How much money did you spend on that? $18 for a 6-pack. Is that really where you want your money to go? Your daughter's 15 years old. You haven't set aside a penny for her. I'm looking up at the liquor cabinet and liquor bottles galore. I'm adding up. Oh man, I drank 3 of these 6-packs over the past week. There's $60-$70 times 4. There's $240 something dollars plus the liquor cabinet plus the right. It started really dawning on me the pathway that I had been on. And I stood there for a second and looked at that bottle called Old Dirty Bastard. And I went, that's what I have become. Right. And I was still a young man in the prime of my life. And I had blown so many opportunities. So raising my daughter, the mistakes I've made. Oh my God. That girl has absolutely every reason to never speak to me again. And God definitely is working in her because she came back, and I'm so grateful. So all of this is hitting me like a flood as I'm standing there in the refrigerator. And the voice said, do you know why you do this? I have no idea. No idea. I was all sorts of different substance abuse. Ever since I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I never went to work drunk or anything like that. I guess you would call me a functional addict, right? I never smoked pot, you know, in the morning before I went to teach school. It wasn't like that. It was, you know, you come home in the evenings and you rely on the weekends, go out, work in the garden, whatever, take a walk in the woods. And, you know, one way or another, but ultimately you're living in this fog. And I recognized that I was in this fog. I wasn't in the natural state that God created me to be in, due to the substance abuse, due to the nature of addiction and always looking toward that solution, and combine that with the train wreck that was my life and not knowing who I was. And it all hit me at one time. And he said, do you know why you do this? And I said, well, let's do this, Lord. If this is God talking to me, if you want me to know something about myself, show me, and let's go from there.
Yeah.
And he went like this. Do you really like the taste of that beer? Well, sometimes, but not really. Do you really like what it does to you? No, well, yeah, kind of, sort of, but then I regret it. Okay. You're not addicted to the alcohol. You're addicted to the alcohol, what the alcohol does to you, not the physical results of it, the way your body handles it, or the buzz, or the whatever. Think of it this way. You have a coal, a burning ember inside you that was planted in you, that is resentment, that is anger, that is fear of, I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm going. These people screwed me up, whatever. You compile all those regrets, all the stuff that I threw at you. That ember is burning inside me, and it's eating me up like a cancer from the inside. And I just kept feeding it. And now and then I'd throw alcohol on it. Well, what did the alcohol do? It flared up. Right. What happens when you throw tequila on flame or on a burning coal.
Gets bigger,
It gets bigger.
hotter, worse.
I recognized that was what I was addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
It was the fake light that flame, when it flared up, gave me in my life. It was the fake warmth and the comfort that flame gave me. And then the flame would die down, and I had to throw more alcohol on it in order for it, right?
Yeah.
Every now and then I'd throw a little bit of weed on there and let that smoke go and do its thing. And then I would embellish my being based on that hallucinogen. Pick a poison, dude. Pick a poison. So I recognized it wasn't the individual poisons, it was the addictive nature of my personality in wanting to snuff out that coal, but going about it completely wrong. And I said to God, that was the moment. I said to him, okay, I get it. Now, I don't know what to do with this, And he said, put the bottle down. Follow me. Right? In time, I will show you what that is.
Yeah.
That poison seed that's in you, I'll show it to you.
Yeah.
And we'll work it out together. And you're going to be okay. And that was the beginning of my real journey with Christ, man.
Right. And because that's the whole thing. I think for a lot of the viewers out there who deal with different addictions, which I have, a lot of people will judge the addiction, and what we don't a lot of times do is look at what drives the addiction. If right. and then we try to heal the addiction. We'll stop doing this, but it's really not the addiction. It's the addiction is only the byproduct of the pain that's driving the addiction. And I want the guys out there to really hold on to this, because a lot of you are dealing with that, and it doesn't have to be an addiction that keeps you from work. It doesn't have to be an addiction that lays you on the couch, but we all know we have something that we run to, and we say, okay, let me just stop this. But really, it's the deeper thing. It's the deeper journey inside to find out the very thing that's really driving you toward it. And so a lot of times we'll drown in the guilt of the addiction and not fix the thing that's pushing us to it. I'm glad you brought that up. As you moved on in your life, you built your faith, and I want to talk about your daughter for a little bit.
Bella, my Bella Boo.
Yeah, your Bella Boo. How did you begin to try to heal that relationship?
It was with a phone call. Hey, baby, I know we haven't talked for a while. I know we're slowly recuperating our relationship since your mom and I split. God bless you. I'm glad we're talking again and emailing and chatting. But I just found out I have severe cancer and I need to see you. Would you please come to Charlotte and visit me? And she did. And that's when everything changed.
What did it take for you to pick up that phone?
Oh, I that wasn't hard for me. Okay. We had hashed things out via email and text.
Okay, so you had a bridge already.
Very long emails and texts where after her mom and I split, she just and as I said, rightfully so, just blasted me. And this was a 21-year-old kid. What, 20 years old then? 19-year-old kid. Okay. So she was out of high school. She was a young adult, dealing with her own dysfunction and the mess of our broken relationship, and a dad who wasn't really a good dad in a lot of ways. Right. So how did I deal with that? Was I reconciled who I was with who God is showing me that I am. And I took the approach with my daughter that I felt God was taking with me. Right? So
wow, hold Sam. That was a jewel. You took the approach with your daughter that you felt like God was taking with you.
Well, that I should say that I knew God was taking with me.
That you knew God.
Right.
Go dig into that a little more.
Okay. God showed me and even told me who your birth parents were does not matter. It doesn't matter. You are a child of mine. You have been adopted, as the scriptures tell us, into my family. I will guide you. I will correct you. I will undo all that ever harmed you. All you need to do is follow me. And I began doing that and seeing the results in my life. And all through that process, early on in this process, of course, mistakes are made, because that level of knot doesn't just unwind at one time. Of course, it takes... Yeah. My God, you should see my gear cabinet here in my studio. I got XLR cables and guitar cables, and every time I go out to do a gig, I got to sit there and spend an hour because to unwind the mess, because I never put them away correctly. I recognize this. And God was showing me through it all his patience. He was showing me that my mistakes didn't matter. He loved me unconditionally anyway. So it hit me when my daughter I say it again, Bella Boo, my love. And we've had this conversation. If you're watching, baby doll, you know, I said to you and early on that I responded to her tirade against me thusly. There's a lot of things that you said that were correct. Much of the assessment about who your father was valid. A lot of the things that you're pointing out, if I could just be blunt, you're remembering it very different than what actually happened. But that's okay. We all have our perspective, and it is 99% of reality. If that's what you think happened, I respect that. I'm okay with that. That all said, all that crap that you just said, that's not who your dad is today. Now, I understand that that's going to be tough to swallow. I get that isn't going to necessarily set well with you right now. You may resent me for that. You may look at me and say that's just an excuse to try to get out and absolve yourself of responsibility. Whatever, however you're going to deal with what I'm saying to you, I have no control over. So all I can do is tell you, I hear you, I love you, I respect you, I want a relationship with you. I will bend over backwards and go on my knees to the end of the earth for you. But I will not continue in the destructive cycles that we were embroiled in. Right. So if you're going to go down that road with me, I'm just not going to respond. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to point out if I think you're wrong. I'm just not going there. I will simply respond and say, I love you. When you're ready, let's talk. I will be here for you. And in the meantime, I'm going to give you as much space as you need to deal with what you need to deal with, but always know your daddy's here. Right? And it dawned on me at that time that that's what God was doing with me.
Yes.
He was unwinding everything that happened. He was showing me very clearly, Sam, just like you told your kid, what you thought happened to you at 7 years old, that was ingrained in you. That scarred you. That devastated you. That played into creating you and turning you into this monster in many ways that you were for many years. But do you ever think for a minute that maybe you're not quite remembering that correctly? Do you ever think for a minute that your dad, as abusive as he was dealing with something that you at 7 years old, you have no idea what he was dealing with. You have no idea what he was dealing with. He came from an abusive family. He came from a family. He didn't even learn to speak English until he was, I think he told me, in the 8th grade. Dropped out of school at an early age to start his, because they were just coming out of the Depression. He needed to support his family. He became an entrepreneur. He became a businessman out of necessity because he didn't have the education. If he did, his life was rough. And you're going to sit there and live the rest of your life hating him because he was dealing with the cards he was handed the best that he knew, and he didn't know. He never had the benefit of having great health insurance and being able to go in there and have counseling sessions like you have.
Yeah.
He never had the blessings that you've had. So you can continue to hate him, or you can let that go and move along. Isn't that what you're saying to your daughter? Be patient. Be patient. Do what you say. Love her. Show her you love her. Be patient with her. I will bring her back to you. I never in a million years thought that it would take
I get it.
I never in a million years did I think that it would take a life-threatening diagnosis for him to do that. Yeah. Right? You're just sitting there waiting for the miracle, and the miracle came through another poison that I found was threatening to end my life. Yeah. That was planted in me who knows how many years ago. And I'm sorry.
No, don't be. I understand that you might not believe I do, but I do, in that I was just in an interview yesterday and I was talking to a brother and I was telling him I spent my whole life serving people all around the world. Preacher at 14, pastor at 21, spent my whole life serving people. And I didn't ever get in touch with myself. I didn't know who I was. I just knew who I needed to be for people. Got married, got divorced, knew I needed to be for people. And my life was about people. I never knew myself, never knew what I loved, never knew what I care about. And you know when I found me? I found me in a dialysis chair. I found me in a dialysis chair dying. And then I got to know, hold up, who am I? What matters to me? It took me to face death. It took me to see my body lose 75 pounds and I couldn't eat, throwing up. It took me to go there to find me. And sometimes that trauma that a lot of men are covered in, that we cannot locate ourselves, sometimes it takes like the most disastrous thing at times. Not that it's good, but at times it takes that to get in touch with what really matters. I get just where you are, Sam. I've been there, and I couldn't believe that it took that. It took that for me to say, wow, let me get in touch with this guy who's been an alcoholic and been a pothead and everything else, trying to escape all my trauma. It took me to sit in a dialysis chair, not knowing whether I would ever make it out, to get in touch. I see exactly where you are with that. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you found out your cancer diagnosis,
wow.
What part of you shifted? Your mind, your soul, your body? Of course, you didn't know it was there, but your mind, what shifted? What part of you as a man did it hit the strongest? When you found out your diagnosis?
So now I'm going to share with you some really deep, heavy stuff, man.
Okay.
Not that what I have shared already hasn't been deep and heavy. So here's the irony of it all, and this is where God brought me. I'm 55 right now. I was diagnosed at 53 with severe prostate cancer.
Okay.
A very aggressive form that had spread. And I had no... Okay. Let's go back into the Wayback Machine that I shared with you. The first word I used, confusion. Who am I as a man? One of the second things I shared, resentment and no clarity as to who sired me, who was my father, why am I who I am at a genetic level,
Mm-hmm.
birth parents, the disconnection with my father, adoptive father, who was a very dysfunctional
Mm-hmm.
in how he raised me.
Mm-hmm.
The dysfunction that I exhibited as I grew, not knowing truly who I was,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing or understanding where I came from, not knowing or really appreciating or understanding my own power as a man, the gifts that God had given me that I abused, that I used wrongly. Whether I have the gift of gab, and
Mm-hmm.
I recognize I've always been very articulate and just quick-witted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized as a man I was using that in my life for manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
right? All these things that go back to my addictive nature. Everything I just shared with you.
Mm-hmm.
Now here I am, diagnosed with prostate cancer. The very core of what physically makes me a man.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. So it dawned on me, it's not a disease.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dis-ease that was planted in me, in my loins, literally, that blossomed into disease.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe this, and I'll just say it because I know it might sound crazy, but you're a faith-based podcast, so I don't believe that I had cancer cells in me growing. I think I had demons in me. At a molecular level, that all those seeds that were planted many, you can't make this up. That cannot be coincidence. That all those things that I was growing out of, all those things that God was sorting out of me, all those things that he was showing me, that he was healing me from, and then all of a sudden, you think you're right at the prime of your life. You think you're retired from teaching. You got this new great wife and your new life, and you're starting your business, and you're getting back to your music and all this new life in Charlotte, North Carolina, beautiful city. By the way, you have cancer, not just cancer, prostate cancer, and a direct attack in my manhood. Now, you tell me you're not seeing what I'm getting at.
I see. Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm like, wow. I mean, all I could say was, wow. And then get about doing what I had to do to heal and get right. My God almighty, dude, what a journey this has been, and what God has shown me through this. It's the stories that I could tell, as far as the revelations and the inner workings of this healing process, and coming to understand the poison that was planted in me so many years ago that I lended to. How much of that might have been due to the alcohol that I had drank, all that poison that I had drank all those years, to hide the deeper seed, and that I had never really dealt with, right? So dealing with regret, how much of this was maybe environmental, how much of it was genetic, how much of it might be my own poisoning of my own body, how much of it is demonic and spiritual in nature. My God, where my mind went, and if I could be blunt, even where it goes some days today. It is a challenge unlike anything that I never thought that I would face, that I didn't think that I would ever be able to face. And God, every step of the way, every day, shows me through it all, hey man, I got you. Watch this. Let me share. Okay, remember I shared with you the other day This is how it works. We were on the phone the other day, and I said about this text that sometimes like a revelation will happen, something will happen.
Yeah.
My wife and I talk about it. We go, "Wow, that was crazy. Maybe it was a coincidence, whatever." And then a friend of mine will send me a text, a scripture that aligns to what it was that we just discussed. I'm sitting here right as we start our podcast, 12:31. I get a text. Let's jump right into the scriptures to find our meeting place with the Lord. Chronicles 5:13. In unison, when the trumpeters and singers were to make themselves heard with one voice, praising and thanking the Lord, and when they raised their voices, accompanied by the trumpets and the cymbals and other instruments of music, and they praised the Lord, saying, "For he is good, for his mercy and loving kindness endure forever." Then the cloud of the Lord was Then the house of the Lord was filled with a cloud, so that the priests could not remain standing to minister because of the cloud. For the glory and brilliance of the Lord filled the house. As we worship the Lord, we should find ourselves in one of two positions, either on our knees or prostrated before the Lord. This is what happens when his presence really enters our room. You most likely will be crying as well. God's presence has that effect on people. The force that brings us to our knees or completely makes us fall out of his love. Our love is conditional and has limits, but God's love is unfathomable and doesn't have any limits. That's why people fall out. They start crying and begin repenting of their sins. God's love is too much for the sinful nature to handle. Reserve your prayer time because God is coming to visit you. He wants you to do some remodeling in your heart. Some old broken things need to go so that you can continue to grow. Let's pray.
That's powerful.
Right? That literally came to me right at 12:30 as we started this podcast, where I basically summarized that whole thing with,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there going, okay, that is one of the subtle little ways that I've noticed God, which isn't too subtle. And I've had other things that happen to me, man. My wife calls it living the supernatural life. Just recognizing, giving it all up that God's got you. He cares for you, and everything is going to work out according to his plan for you. And I know it sounds trite, or it is what the scriptures say, but when you're facing, oh my God, how is getting an aggressive form of cancer working out for my good?
Right.
Brought my daughter back to me.
Right.
Who am I to question God's method?
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people get in trouble is, I want my life to be this. I want God to do this. But a lot of times we try to pre-write how he's going to do it. And then we get disappointed because he didn't follow our plan. It's the same thing when Christ went to the cross, his prayer in the garden.
He didn't want
was
that.
basically saying, I still want to get this done, but is there any other way? Do
Yeah.
I have to get nailed? Like, is there any other way?
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing we all go through. Sam, I want to ask this question. I asked this final question to my podcast guests, and I want to close with this powerful interview today. And thank you so much. Before we get to our question, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for your vulnerability. Everything that we talk about on this podcast was in this podcast interview today. The story, the honesty, the vulnerability, the confusion, this is what it is. This is what men need. And I'm so thankful that you were able to offer that today on the Dear Brother podcast.
Well, I'm thankful for the opportunity. As I said, I've never done this. This is I've led worship in churches and shared a 2-minute, 3-minute version of my testimony, but I've never done anything like this.
It was supposed to happen, man.
Yeah.
It was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
If you lost everything today, your achievements, your talents, your successes, even your failures.
My guitars?
The
Would I
guitars
have to
go.
lose my guitars?
Guitars are gone. All the equipment's
Ah!
gone. Everything's gone. What's the
Okay.
one lesson you want your life to teach other people?
That God is real.
Hmm.
That God, Christ, is real, and He's waiting. He's just waiting for you to realize it. He's just waiting for you to accept that, and that He's there, and that He will save you from what you need saved from. He will put you on the path that He has planned and outlined and detailed for you before the scriptures are true, before you came about, before you were even a thought, before you were planted in your mother's womb. He knew you.
Yeah,
It's real.
it's real.
He's real. That's what I know. And if anybody can look in my eyes and tell that, they can tell me I'm wrong. No way, baby. Absolutely no way. So if there's anything that I want people to know, it's that. It's anything else is a lie.
Mhm.
It's true. He's
True.
the truth, the light, the life, the way.
Mhm.
And He's just waiting for you to say, let's go, brother.
Sam, that's major. And I'm gonna tell you, I had an interview yesterday with another brother, and I asked a similar question to end the podcast. And he has a lot of achievements. He's come through his story, crazy story. And you know what he said at the end?
What?
He said, I want people to know that my faith is real.
Yeah.
Powerful, man. Powerful. Sam, thank you, brother, again. Thank
Yeah.
your wife for sharing your time. I know this is your day off. You could be hanging out with her, and we're going to get you right back to it. But thank you,
Oh,
brother.
well, thank
Really
you.
appreciate you coming on the Dear Brother podcast, man.
Yes.
Let me close the show, and I'll be right back to you.
Can I give it? Do you let your guests give contact information?
Yes, you can give the contact information right here, and then I'll also put it in the description.
Okay.
When I
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll have you send
Because
it everything to me. Yeah.
I do firmly believe that, telling this story, my writing songs and the band that I've been forming recently, and all these opportunities to share are wonderful, but sometimes just having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, if there's anybody that's watching and you ever just want to talk, maybe you just want to text, you just want to ear to bend, I'm always, always, always available for that purpose. And I believe that's part of the calling that we all have as followers. Yeah, you can put my contact information in the video. You can find me at ateromedia.com. That's my company. And on Facebook, Sam Atero. Put my links up there, and please definitely encourage people to get hold of me.
Please, everybody. Hey, man, reach out. This man has a story. He has wisdom to share from his story, and I'm sure his story has touched many lives out there, including mine today. I
Oh,
will
thank
definitely
you.
have all his information in the description, man, for you all to reach out. The links, I'll put the links up so you don't have to type. You hit the link, you can be connected to Sam right away. Sam,
Awesome.
thanks again, my friend. Thanks again, my friend.
This
I'll see
was
you.
wonderful. I can't thank you enough. God bless you, Christian. You have a wonderful rest of your day as well. And to everybody watching, blessings to you. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Meet you too, man.
Okay.
Appreciate you too. Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening to the Dear Brother podcast, being a part of our show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, become part of the Dear Brother podcast where grown men keep on growing. Heck of a story today. Heck of a life. Man, we thank God for Sam and his story. I hope it encouraged a lot of you out there. Hey, man, we're going to end like we always end. Remember, I love you, but make sure you love you even more. Stand tall every day, be wise every day. Walk this life out with no fear, no shame, and no compromise. If this is your first time, you're hearing it for the first time. If you've been on the show, you know how we end the show. Repeat after me. Yesterday was history, and tomorrow's a mystery. All we have is right now. What you gonna do with it? What you gonna do about it? Hey, man, I love you. See you soon. Peace.